All right, this is Genesis 25 to 27. So at the start of 25, yeah, basically a little bit on Abraham, but then basically Abraham passes. He's buried in the same tomb of his wife, but it says in verse 9, his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him there, right? So you can already sort of see in these stories, and it's definitely going to come in this section, the 25 to 27, and even beyond that, that we sort of expect these stories to be like this clear black and white. That's what we do with everything in history right now. That's big debates going on right now in modern politics that where everything's polarized. But even looking at history, it's always we look back at whatever World War II and say, well, obviously we were the good guys, so therefore it was only the good guys. And you sort of gloss over the fact that we allied with it's Stalin and other people. So real life is kind of messy. And it's not always as simple as, white hat, black hat. And that's what happens in these stories. And what's clear through a lot of this is that God chooses who he chooses to bless. It's not for us to say, well, therefore, why did God pick this person? Because he did this sin or that sin. We all sin. And that's clear as you go through this. These stories aren't just well, obviously this person behaved appropriately all the time, right? So they're not here to just gloss over the details and sort of say, here's only the good side of this. They're very real stories, very challenging at times stories, right? So, but you see here in this case, Isaac and Ishmael come back together and actually work together and bury their father. Um, then you get your seventh Toledot. Those are the genealogies, the histories, and these are the family records of. And it goes through Ishmael, a quick one. And then in verse 19, it moves on to Isaac. And that's the story from here on out. Is sort of under Isaac, although it talks a lot about his kids, but the Toledot sort of usually goes until he's either passing or past, right? As it goes through. So what you have is the story of Jacob and Esau being born, two nations in your womb. To Rebekah, the Lord speaks to Rebekah, doesn't to Isaac. So she already has in her brain that Jacob is going to be the more senior, and that Esau will be serving him, right? And Esau, as you read through the chapter, it says Esau came out red looking and covered with hair. So you miss a lot of these. The old Hebrew loves these sort of word plays. So red looking sounds much like Edom, and covered with hair. The word for hair sounds much like seer. And it turns out that basically Esau fathers a people called the Edomites in Edom, in a region called Seir. So it's sort of an intentional play as you're sort of reading through this. So and it is red hair basically, that he comes out with. So, but in this whole first chapter, already it's sort of Jacob kind of convinces Esau to sell him his birthright for next to nothing, right? So what's the birthright? Basically, the understanding that I have that seems to be pretty standard is that you get like basically 2/3 would go to the first son and 1/3 would be to the second son. Whereas basically what they ended up doing is swapping. So so that Jacob would get 2/3 of the inheritance and 1/3. There's a blessing that happens later in the chapter, which is additional to this. But in that chapter, basically, what happens to a certain extent is Jacob steals. He doesn't steal. Esau gives it up, but Esau doesn't come across as necessarily the brightest guy all the time. A bit more impulsive, wild. He's the hunter type, but he's not a bad man. You'll find later that he actually sort of plays the senior role in forgiving Jacob. But Jacob is the one where the line is going to continue from Abraham through. And God chose that, whether you like it or not, type of thing, because God can choose who he wants to choose. He is the potter. We are just the pots. So despite this sort of human weakness, that's what's going on in this story. So then you get into chapter 26, and right at the beginning of 26, verse 3, God reconfirms that oath to Isaac to continue on this blessing that he has, because Abraham had listened to me and kept my commandments and my instructions. So he gives that blessing to Isaac. Isaac goes through some of the same sort of nonsense with Abimelech. Most people believe that Abimelech might well be just either the name like son of Abimelech the third type of thing, or it could just be a title as well. So it may not be the same person. Abimelech seems to be a term that could just mean king, or it was handed down to multiple generations type of thing. So it may not be the same guy, but very similar story of some deceit saying that his wife is his sister and the same type of stuff going on. Another famine, and then some conflict over the wells, and they fight over it as you keep reading through. But you find that Esau marries two wives, both foreigners, so they're both Hittites, and that doesn't go well, particularly for Rebecca, his mother. She doesn't seem to get along with them very well. And then the big story comes in 27, where Jacob steals the blessing, basically. So what is the blessing when you're doing that if he's already taken his birthright? So the blessing is basically that blessing of Abraham. So that blessing is coming down through where he's saying you're going to be successful in your growing. You're going to have the promises of God. You're going to have the favor of God, as well as the leadership of the clan. Right? So that seems to be handed on to Jacob when that still could have gone to Esau, right? That blessing could have gone to Esau. So that's the difference between the birthright and the blessing. Birthright, I think, is more just monetary, where the blessing is more of this is you will be blessed by being a leader that is blessed by God. And he handed that on to Jacob. So you see all the way through this, there are flaws and troubles. And as you keep reading through Genesis, it's certainly not a, whoa, these are the good people that God has blessed. It is God has blessed people despite the fact that they are not always good. And in general, you hope that they behave. Abraham was credited by his faith as being righteous. So it's not as if he's a bad person. He responded to God positively and lived as if God was Lord of his life and followed his commands. So he was blessed by that. Does that mean he was a perfect person? No. And as you get down through his kids, the same types of stories happen where they're not perfect people. They do fall down. But that said, when God calls them, most of the time they do actually respond and say, yes, I'm going to do what you tell me to do. So he works through imperfect people. All right. We end the chapter 27 with some discord as Jacob is sort of on the run because of stealing the blessing, and obviously Esau is not too happy about that. Esau, as all the descriptions, is probably a big beastly hairy man. So Jacob is taking a little vacation. See how that goes. So we will read more about that as we keep going. All right. Have a blessed week.